We would like to thank Nuix for sponsoring today's program. You will now see some information about Nuix on your screen. Nuix protects, informs, and empowers society in the knowledge age. Leading organizations around the world turn to Nuix when they need fast, accurate answers for investigation, cybersecurity incident response, insider threats, litigation, regulation, privacy, risk management, and other essential challenges. I would now like to introduce our moderator. Ms. Julie Colgan is the Head of Information Governance Solutions for Nuix, where she is responsible for setting and executing against the global market and product strategies for Nuix IG solutions. She leads a team of subject matter experts who help customers make the most out of their Nuix investments. She is past president of ARMA International, has multiple industry certifications, and has more than 15 years of experience as an information governance and records management practitioner and advisor. With that, I will now turn the floor over to Julie.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be with you today. So I wanted to get us started with a little bit of context for the topic. So when it comes to your data, if it's valuable, it's vulnerable. That's just the reality of doing business in the information age. The eDiscovery process by its nature involves collecting and storing volumes of sensitive and valuable data. And that data may itself be sensitive, and that intentional or accidental compromise could cause serious damage to your organization's interest and reputation. But of course, it also has a high inherent value because it's essential to your ability to defend or prosecute a legal matter. Protecting this data from intentional or unintentional disclosure needs to be a priority. Consider the recent Panama Papers scandal, which we'll talk about a little bit later. While the informant may or may not have been an insider, you can bet that the ensuing litigation that arises from this breach will undoubtedly expose massive amounts of sensitive data, just as the Enron case did. And looking at insider behavior specifically, thanks to folks like Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, while often the target is not related to discovery data specifically, rather things like a government employee in a foreign country who put his life on a no-fly list, that's no joke, or a financial engineer at a hedge fund, for example, who stole proprietary algorithms, it could just as easily be data collected for discovery that's targeted. Of course, it could also even be human error that exposes litigation-related data. In a recent study titled Defending Data, which is one of the handouts available to you on this presentation, the study was done by Ari Kaplan of Ari Kaplan Advisors. He reports that 93% of the study respondents claim that human behavior, intentional or not, is the biggest threat to the organization's security. So without further ado, to help you mitigate the insider risk, we've assembled a panel of experts to explore the issues and opportunities and provide actionable insights for securing data throughout the eDiscovery lifecycle. So I'd like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Michael, do you want to get us started?
Sure, thanks, Julie. My name is Michael Chance. I work for Nuix, which is a software and cybersecurity company. I'm a director on the Business Threat Intelligence and Analysis team, where our primary focus is dealing with insider threats. A little bit about my background. I'm former law enforcement, both local and federal, mostly doing computer crime. I've testified in state and federal court as an expert witness and subject matter expert in computer forensics and insider threats. I've also worked for a government agency and a Fortune 100 healthcare provider where I helped build insider threat programs. And my most recent effort is the white paper we'll be discussing today, Countering Insider Threats in eDiscovery. And the purpose of the paper was to create awareness and shine a light on insider threats within the eDiscovery process.
Thank you, Michael. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Almost didn't get off mute there in time. My name's Jeff Griffiths. I'm a principal in Deloitte's advisory practice. I'm based out of Chicago, and my areas of expertise or focus, I guess I should say, are eDiscovery, computer forensics, and data analytics specifically. I've made a career out of helping my clients kind of get through very critical events by remaining calm when the others may not be. And during this process, helping them identify ways to be better prepared to address similar challenges in the future, either because they're in a highly regulated environment, they can expect more government type of investigations, or they're in an industry that has a certain amount of pattern litigation or what have you.
Wonderful, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Scher.
Hi, so I'm James Shearer. I'm counsel with Baker Hostetler in New York. I'm a litigator, but I also co-chair our information governance group here. And I'm involved in a lot of eDiscovery, especially more recently in the area of data breach and kind of our response efforts. And a lot of my work really focuses on translating what's happening within systems and within IT professionals' work and how that matters for litigation or regulatory response, and getting to what the story is, making sure that it makes sense and that we've got a defensible process in place, which also, you know, there's always a concern here, and we'll talk about this a little bit, how active efforts in this space can translate to risk elsewhere, and it's always going to be a balancing effort throughout the process.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. When Michael was first drafting the white paper, which by the way is also available as a download handout on this session, when he was first writing it and I saw a draft of it, I thought, those are usually two separate topics, eDiscovery and insider threat. So it got me to thinking about, you know, what are we seeing here? And in reality at Nuix, we're seeing more and more in industry previously separate or siloed disciplines now converging, or at least collaborating more as a result of what I call the information imperative. It's like these bullets on the slide here. James, are you seeing this convergence from your role as co-chair of the IG group? What do you think is happening and why?
Well, as far as the why, I think there's an expectation that things work, that if you need to find something, you'll be able to find it. And why wouldn't you? Because you can open up Google or another search engine and you've got what seems like the entirety of human knowledge right at your fingertips. So that sets an expectation, and that expectation trends into eDiscovery as well. So you've got these converging factors. You've got so much more information that's being generated, and the vast majority of it is being generated digitally, which doesn't mean that it's immediately available and that you do have that easy button search. That's not how these things work when you're working on collection and preservation and any kind of review efforts, but the expectation remains there. And I'd say here, because of how these things converge and the expectations are there, we are in the position here where we're trying to make these systems work for eDiscovery purposes or investigative purposes or for information governance to review what we have. And in order to do that, you have to translate that data from various different types and sources and locations into something or some places that you can review across, that you can apply technologies across. Well, when you do that, it's the equivalent of pulling all your valuables together in one space, which you need to do if you want to take advantage of them and if you want to be responsive to requests for production or even for preservation from another side. But in doing so, you're making it easier for you to use it, but you're also essentially creating a vault or is a separate copy of information that's easier to use for people who might want to use it for other purposes other than the purposes for which you've compiled it. So a lot of areas here converging, a lot of digital information, and then concerns about what you're doing. If you're doing it for one purpose, then what kind of situations are you creating for other people who might also want to use the data?
Yeah, excellent. So, Jeff, this convergence that we're talking about, is it perhaps in fact the evidence of the need for information governance, a holistic enterprise scale strategy and framework? Is that perhaps why the EDRM came out with this model?
Yeah, Julie, absolutely. I think for many enterprise organizations today, eDiscovery is now being seen and treated as an ongoing business process, and as part of that, as a formal business process, it's starting to get more of the discipline that it deserves. Some of that captured here in the information governance reference model that you indicated. And I think there's an interesting narrative in how we came to this position, how we segued from the more kind of linear and transactional-based EDRM to the more lifecycle theme that we see here in the information governance reference model. In the more discovery-centric world, there were really two areas where we helped clients focus initially, and these were primarily the areas of cost and risk, right? We spent a lot of time helping them drive out the costs associated specifically with discovery. The low-hanging fruit was usually in the areas of processing, hosting, and review, where Even today, with a lot of the great advancements in analytics and the technologies and the facilitators that we have, that part of the process can still make up a significant portion of the total cost of discovery. In the same breath, the risk to most organizations was usually in their preservation and collection activities, where if things weren't managed correctly, you could open yourself up to spoliation or adverse inference rulings, which in and of themselves could carry significant monetary and reputational costs. So a lot of firms out there have been spending a lot of time and energy focused on driving down these costs and mitigating the risk by building out many of these capabilities behind their own firewall and right-sizing their program. And as they've done this, what we've learned is the sooner in the process you can start understanding your data, the sooner in the process you can start making decisions on the data, it can have dramatic downstream impacts, not only in terms of the cost of discovery, but also in the value the information can provide back to the business in general. So all of a sudden, we're out of this reactive response process and into something much more proactive and holistic as presented vis-a-vis the information governance reference model, right? This is the big data play that everyone is excited about, how to better enable information in the enterprise to service that enterprise. This is where we get into the unified vision of driving value from the data that's first created and then appropriately classified and then used and reused, stored, managed, this ideally, hopefully, a push as opposed to a pull of information in the organization. And now we're seeing discovery and disposition are just a part of this bigger life cycle. And so by extension, this means, yes, absolutely, it's a bigger effort. It's more encompassing. And you have to engage the right enterprise stakeholders from a legal perspective, from a records perspective, from an IT perspective, from the security, to develop and implement the facilitating policies and processes across the organization. And actually, I think there's another interesting part of the story. It's not just the information professionals who recognize the value of moving upstream in this model, but the technology providers and the service providers have also recognized that there's this opportunity to help serve their clients in this new space, and quite appropriately have been expanding their suite of tools and our use cases from just discovery to other areas of information governance like enterprise information archiving, enterprise content management, defensible disposition, and the like.
That's right. That's absolutely right. We see the same thing at Nuix, and that's really where we see ourselves as positioned in the information transparency business, which is why you see us working in so many different verticals, right? So we're talking about eDiscovery and insider threat, which traditionally are two separate things. Right. But in reality, it's the transparency in the data itself that drives good decision making. And so the sooner you can get that transparency and the broader and deeper and more accurate you can get the details, the better decisions you can make, regardless of the event you're trying to make a decision about. Very good. All right, so let's move on into a little discussion about why should we care about all of this? Is this really such a big deal? I think we're all nodding our heads yes. Let's start with Michael here. Michael, can you give us kind of the lowdown on insider threats, the contours, and particularly who's involved?
Certainly. So when we're talking about insider threat, an insider threat is a security threat that originates from within your organization. So essentially, it's a people problem. And these people they're the people that work within your organization, and they have access to your organization's critical value data. They could be employees, former employees, contractors, vendors, business associates, and there's also different types of insiders. You have the witting insider, which they cause intentional abuse with their access to their systems. There's the unwitting, which they cause unintentional harm, and I had a client tell me very recently about the unwitting. He just said, we have smart people doing stupid things. So they're not purposely causing harm, they just don't know any better, or maybe there's no training or awareness. And then the last type is the malicious insider, where they're deliberately doing wrong on your network. And The reason why you need to be concerned about these people is they're familiar with your network. They know the data, and they have legitimate access to it, most likely to conduct their daily jobs. And now this opens the door for data exfiltration, destruction, deletion, and data manipulation, and especially those with privileged access. So consider for a moment the harm a rogue user would pose to your network with admin credentials, or for that matter, stolen credentials. An unauthorized person on your network with access and keys to the kingdom could cause substantial harm to your organization. And then when we're looking at the outside influences here as well, you have the nation states where they may coerce or blackmail your employees into exfiltrating data. And you also have competitors, which may be enticing your employees to maybe steal some data and come work for them, and that gives them a competitive advantage. So that's basically the lowdown on insider threats.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that strikes me too on this diagram is on the far right we have cloud and big data, and so we have all of these people where there's inherently just an opportunity for error, as well as incentivized bad guys. But now the data is scattered everywhere as well. It's not just behind a firewall within a corporate enterprise. It's up in the cloud, in a public cloud, a private cloud, a hybrid cloud. It's big data lakes where it may be disassociated with metadata and context, and maybe used in unintended ways. So it's a really complex situation. Thanks for that. So from this same study, I pulled this statistic. They claim that the top 3 locations where sensitive data is at risk in volume in this 4-metric insider threat report was first databases at 49%, server second at 39%, and cloud third at 36%. But they were drawing attention to there being a reported perception that mobile data is a huge risk. That's where a lot of fear is being generated in the bellies of executives. But that actually the volume of sensitive data on mobile devices is actually much lower than is perceived. Does this sound right to you, James? What are your thoughts in terms of where are the biggest risks located? I can't talk either.
Well, if they're talking about volume here, then yeah, I mean the mobile devices, you just don't have necessarily as much data on them as you do in those data lakes or those repositories of information. So while the perception is there, and I think as well, a mobile device is very apparent. We all have them. I mean, almost everybody, if you're on this webinar, you're not a Luddite, so you have a mobile device and you interact with it. You see it every day. And you should be aware of that. And you realize if you can't get in with your password or something, you think about access to that device and what might be on it because you're living so much of your life through it. But the back end of a lot of these systems and the data locations for them, I mean, that is the data of importance. That's what keeps the organization running. Sure, you might have to make a decision based on an email or some kind of approval, but really the trains are running based on the back-end systems, the data, those systems interactions that work throughout the company or organization to keep everything moving. So it's unsurprising that the volume of information really is in the heart of those systems. What I want to point out with this and with the presentation generally is when we're thinking about this in the context of eDiscovery, what you do when you're collecting information for eDiscovery, and often you do need to collect it to put it in a usable format so that you can at least elicit facts out of it, if not make specific productions to a requesting party within the litigation. You're creating another set of data. So, and it's not a mobile device set of data. This is a repository of data. It may be an additional copy of a lot of information, and it's challenging to preserve information in place in response to a request for preservation or a specific request for production. So you end up using an organization and using the IT professionals and the legal professionals within an organization to collect all that data. And that makes sense. That's a normal part of the process. But what you're doing by doing that is creating another repository. You're creating another set, and not just any set of data. This is, in large part, targeted to the litigation or the regulatory investigation or the response or whatever it might be, but it's also highlighting the important individuals within the organization, the these are your crown jewels because that's what you're required to grab. But in grabbing them for eDiscovery, it goes back to a point that was made earlier. That's where eDiscovery within an organization needs to have its own set of guidelines, because you can't just remove things from the normal set of process or normal controls and then expect those to be less vulnerable than they were otherwise. You're taking them out of their natural environments. You're creating another data set. That's where you're really putting your most sensitive data at risk, and you've created a perfect parcel for other people who might want to use it for untoward ways. So thinking about where data resides within organizations is very, very important. But you also want to think about where data is coming from within the eDiscovery process and the manner in which you're transmitting it, and then how you're holding onto that data and maintaining it during the pendency of discovery, and then, of course, how you remediate after the obligations are gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So, Michael, you want to talk to us a little bit about how is this happening? You touched on some of this already, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what is the nature of an insider? Who are they, and how are they getting involved in these errors or nefarious activities?
So insider threats are the most costly and the most damaging threat to your organization. Recent studies indicate over 50% of employees take sensitive data when they leave your organization. And a third of them say they would sell company data. So this is concerning for organizations that have a high turnover rate. Stuff's definitely going out the door. And they're accomplishing this through abusing their access rights. Most employees can access sensitive data that they shouldn't have access to, and that puts your organization at risk. Could be theft of credentials, or just sharing the credentials poses a significant security risk. So now you have an unauthorized person on your network with the keys to the kingdom. That's potentially dangerous right there. And the threat can be intentional or unintentional. We do see quite a bit of human error in cases where maybe things go unaddressed or unnoticed. Maybe your systems aren't patched or your software is out of date. So it's not always intentional. And some of the factors that enable insiders is just technology in general. Storage devices are larger. It's easier to transfer data and take off premises. The use of social media, you have the outside influence, and it's a larger world we're living in with the use of social media, which gets into we move toward the why. You get into the motivation. Why are they doing this? More than half of cyber criminals or cybercrime involves insiders. And what could be, and part of the why in motivating them is they could be disgruntled, they want financial gain, maybe they feel entitled, or they want a business advantage. Things like entitlement. You get a database administrator, and he's going to leave the company. Well, he feels like that's his database. He built it. He feels like it belongs to him. So maybe he takes it with him, or maybe he deletes it before he leaves. Or somebody looking to gain some sort of business advantage where a salesman leaves the company and he's going to take a client list with him. And again, I know we've said when it comes to your data, if it's valuable, it's vulnerable. When we're talking about PII and PHI and intellectual property, this is very valuable information to your company. And if it's valuable, it needs to be safeguarded.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the different ways that credentials can be stolen. I remember reading an article a while back about an executive for a major technology company who worked from home a lot. And he didn't really think about, ironically, he was in the security side of the house for this company. He didn't really think to monitor the traffic hitting his home network until one day he did. And he noticed that, strangely, he was getting a lot of pings from places like China and other places where it seemed a bit odd that they might be pinging his home network. But in reality, if he VPNs in through that network, is that considered an insider threat as well? Mobile mobile employees are common. Is that part of this landscape as well?
Yes, absolutely. There's vulnerabilities everywhere, And for every vulnerability, there's an insider that has a way of exploiting the network or the data.
Absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about this. One of the interesting things that I find is the second bullet on this slide, Michael. There's real cash value to stealing information these days. Talk to us a little bit about the why behind this. Why is it people are doing what they're doing?
Well, as I mentioned, stuff like PII and PHI, this information is very valuable. So on the black market, there's $100 per valid ID. If you have somebody who has access to a database within an organization, they could exfiltrate hundreds, could be thousands of member IDs and go sell it on the black market. And there's definitely a market for it, unfortunately. But again, PII, PHI, very valuable. And so organizations, financial and healthcare, places that harbor this information are being targeted heavily these days, as well as law firms, as the slide you just brought up. This policy is not being enforced. So it's too easy for employees to take data and go unnoticed. And here we are, we have the Panama Papers. This is the largest leak ever, 2.6 terabytes of data. So I'm not sure how 2.6 terabytes of data was exfiltrated out of the network and it went unnoticed. And I think because of this, I think law firms are being viewed as being less secure and they're being targeted. They have large amounts of privileged information and the technical controls maybe not in place. And I know with the Panama Papers, they had outdated and unpatched software. They had known vulnerabilities, and their clients' privileged information was out in the open, and over time, 2.6 terabytes. That's not good for an organization.
I agree. James or Jeff, is there anything you want to add here? Some thoughts on current events?
I'd look at when you talk about insiders, we've dealt with both, where you've got people intentionally trying to steal data or trying to sell it. But I think most of it is unintentional. It's with this complexity, trying to just get your job done, moving things around, that's a challenge. And people end up with workarounds. They've got kind of gray market IT or credit card IT where they're going out and purchasing their own solutions that the IT system may not be aware of. And without being aware of it, it's difficult to monitor, it's difficult to patch, it's difficult to create controls around things that you're not aware of, the unknown unknowns from the vantage of those people who are tasked with security. We also see some challenges, too, in responding to a data breach, where we'll come in and we'll take a look and try to work with outside forensic consultants or other places. And the question is always whether the in-house people are going to be as helpful as they want, or if they're concerned now with what's happening, or they're trying to run shadow investigations and further gumming up the works. So trying to come up with clearer lines of responsibility here and plans for dealing with these types of threats, because insider threat as a concept is more, I'd say it's less about intention and more about, well, who could damage things? I mean, I've got a 2.5-year-old at home, and he represents a significant insider threat to our family. And it's not because he wants to go through and damage the TV, or he is fascinated with the DVD player and just wants to put stuff inside of it. He's not going to sell anything on the black market, but he is a walking tornado, and I have to consider him and continue to think of him as a potential insider threat and protect him from himself and protect us from him as well. So you can use that metaphor as far as it takes you.
That is fantastic. I've never heard that before, and I'll use it. All three of my kids are much older, but I remember those days. Good luck to you. So Jeff, let's talk about eDiscovery specifically. So, of course, insider threats are increasing in number and consequence. We're seeing that everywhere. The Prime Minister of Iceland stepped down. But frankly, eDiscovery isn't getting any easier either. While this graphic is certainly simple to look at, the process is still fraught with opportunities for breakdowns in security. So as an eDiscovery specialist and someone who assists clients on a daily basis building and improving upon eDiscovery programs, talk to us about some of the complexities of discovery that we should be on the lookout for in context of exacerbating risk of improper data disclosure.
Yeah, absolutely, Julie. So as you can guess, eDiscovery is a highly distributed and complex, time-sensitive process with many stakeholders involved across all the multiple steps. Now, the folks issuing the legal hold are usually different than the folks who are executing the preservation, who are different than the resources that may be doing the collection activities, who, if it's being done internally by the organization, may have a different set of skills than those who are processing and hosting the data. Likewise, if the data is provided to an outside vendor or law firm for those services, processing, hosting, and review, there's a significant handoff and opportunity for miscommunication in terms of evidentiary and data handling requirements. So everyone could be individually trained up to a T in their respective areas of expertise, or responsibility, but if there's not a consistent policy or procedure for the entire process, you can open up yourself to some risk. One of the best things you can do when you're kind of decomposing these steps and putting them back together from a process and procedure perspective and policy is to make sure that you bring the right stakeholders into the conversation. And this should include representation not only from legal and IP, but absolutely from the security and information governance people in your organization as well. I have a good example of an intention gone awry. I was working with a client who had a very technically competent individual in their law department, and he liked building things with technology and what have you. So he had some access to a contract management solution, and he ended up building the legal holds tracking database on the backbone of this contract management solution, completely outside of the realm of good application development standards that enterprise had. But I got to thinking, so what happens now if this legal hold is subject to discovery itself? Because it's residing in the same application with this contract management solution, does the discovery response extend to the contracts just because it's in the same architecture? So there's those type of challenges that are nuanced and you need to work through as well.
Yeah, really interesting. Michael, I remember reading in your white paper about a case study. It was from, I think, 2005, 2006. It was litigation in the UK where one of the parties noticed that the other party was responding to interrogatories too fast, almost as if they had like a crystal ball. And it turns out that they launched a cybersecurity investigation and discovered that their network had been penetrated and that, in fact, the defendant had hacked in and they could connect it back to them. It emerged that the defendant's access to the claimant's network included eDiscovery data pertinent to the case. It was eventually, I think, it settled outside of court, but it just goes to show you, I mean, you have to think through all of the nitty-gritty details when you're dealing with eDiscovery. And it's really detailed. I think one of the things that's missing from this EDRM model is the time-bound aspect because it exacerbates our own human imperfections. We're all trying to move fast, and it's a really complex, detailed thing with lots of opportunities for failure. So really good discussion.
One of the other interesting things that I'm seeing in the industry from enterprise clients is that more of a tendency to, especially in certain industries, want to hold on to their data kind of in their own four walls. But when it does have to go out, either the size of the matter is so onerous that they need help or there is a certain requirement to have individuals participate outside the organization, what they're doing with these people they're establishing those relationships is absolutely having them respond to some and address some of the cybersecurity requirements that they have as an enterprise, developing a relation with those vendors and service providers to get them assessed on some type of continuum and then work with them through time to improve their performance on that continuum. I think that's a trend that will continue to grow more popular as we keep trying to mitigate these types of risks.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, let's move into the third section here and start talking about, so what do we do about it? Right, we've kind of defined what the problem is or problems are, and why we should be concerned about it, but what can we be doing? I'll start with this famous graphic as a three-legged stool. It's the same as any other challenge, really. There's the people, the process, and the technology that all needs to come together to form a solid foundation, something that's holistic, programmatic, consistent, which lends itself to defensibility, and then taken further, integrated into the overall corporate governance strategy. So in fact, what you're doing ends up serving the organization in the best way. So let's start with the first one, people. James, I think Michael mentioned it earlier, but I'll ask you, is insider threat an IT problem, or is it a people problem?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I mean, it carries with it a number of different, I guess when I look at and what's the solution, and there's not a solution. I'm not great with painting that rosy picture of saying, yeah, we can handle everything and it'll be perfect. Of course it won't. We can just address things, and we want to address them in a way that we can progress toward that goal. Let's get the low-hanging fruit in the very, very first instance, and then try to work toward a better story, because there's not going to be that perfection to this process, but there is going to be a story if the processes of the organization are ever questioned, or if it comes into focus during the pendency of a breach or litigation or concerns with eDiscovery. And there's no way you get to a good story without both involving the technology and doing what you can, and that whatever's feasible for that organization, but also then dealing with the people themselves. So there are three parts, I think, to that interplay here of technology and personnel. One is, what can you do on the technology side that does not involve personal intervention? What do you do for your DLP solutions or the loss prevention software and hardware modifications that you can employ across an enterprise to lessen the opportunity for your employees to do something wrong? Where can you put up the stoplights? Where can you put up speed bumps? Things that you put in place and you don't worry about because you know that they're effective. People may try to get around them, but for the very most part, people take them into account. They'll work and they'll use those limiters or those restrictor plates, and things will move on. But then making sure people know too, because if you're good enough with the technology, then insider or outsider threats are going to become more creative in their approach. And you'll see, and they do move in these waves across. We were dealing with a number of different clients and interested parties where someone realized they could just call up an administrative assistant within an organization and say, hey, we've got some problem with all the W-2s. Why don't you package them up in PDF form and just send them over to us? And they would just package them up in email and send them over. Thinking of, okay, well, how do we prohibit someone from doing exactly that type of action? That's tough on a technology standpoint. Maybe there's a way in which you could do it, but really you're looking and focusing on people and saying, think before you act. Now, you can go the next step further and say, okay, we want to make sure the people to whom we're saying think before you act are people who are going to either think before they act, or they're just not going to act and be contrarian for their own purposes. And that's where getting into and doing what you can here to check employees, vendors, and interested third parties or joint venture partners too. Undertaking all that analysis, or as we were talking about before, if you've got those third parties that are doing business for you, subjecting them to the same types of kind of a security analysis and checklist and meeting certain standards in order to perform that work, especially given sensitive data. So doing all of that together so that if you do have a rogue operator, or if something does happen, you've done what you can to limit the scope of their involvement, the damage they can do, and then when questioned, you can point out, well, there's never going to be a perfect solution here. You can't plug every hole. Even those organizations that create air gaps between their most sensitive systems, you're defeating some of your functionality, and people will still find a way if they're really, really intent on doing it. How can you show that you've operated reasonably as an organization? And that's where building up this picture is. I don't know if you want me to move on to the next slide, or
I'm so sorry. I was just on mute talking to myself. So you're exactly right. I think you made some really great points there. But I think another side of the people that is education, right? So it's been said that establishing, enforcing, and repeating awareness training promotes an organizational culture that's less likely to allow insider threat activities to go unnoticed. Do you find that to be true with your clients? What do you feel are some of the key considerations for such a training program?
Well, we want to make sure that it's of value, that people are getting out of it, and that really depends on the individual too. So training to the role, training to the person, and finding a way to do that that's reasonable, which is usually training to groups or departments, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all. There are certain points that are, and I've worked with clients, especially those that are recovering from a significant incident, where there is increased awareness across the organization. It almost, you really do flip over to the other side where you're so diligent and it slows down processes a little bit, but maybe that's not so bad. It's another bad metaphor. My 2-year-old is not yet driving a car, but my hope is when he does start driving a car, he's going to take it slow. And when he gets on the freeway for the first time, assuming driverless cars are just not the norm at that point, that he will be being cautious getting out there on the ramp, and he's going to get to his destination a little slower, but safer, and he's still going to get there. That giving people and putting systems and practices in place so they know it's okay to take their time, and that other people will appreciate that the process is a little bit slower, but it's more deliberate, and it's taking into consideration issues that they've already confronted and other people have as well.
Excellent. I have a 16-year-old, so I know that pain. Prepare yourself. But I think on the people side, we're talking here about, enable them, empower them, trust them, but also verify. And that goes the same with training, right? So we can deliver it once, and we should at onboarding, but we need to repeat that, and we need to make sure that people don't just show up, but they actually are retaining some of this information and are understanding why it's important for them to do it, what's important for them to do it. Not just the company to do it, but for them to participate, be an active participant. So, Jeff, I wanted to talk a little bit about the policy side. So I think we can all agree that training is great, and specialized training for eDiscovery personnel, in particular on the unique security of eDiscovery data, is important. But frankly, if the training isn't backed up by a set of clear and enforced policies, is it really going to do us any good? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we mentioned before that was how complex this process can be and how many different hands are touching the data in the eDiscovery process. You can have everyone trained up in a specific area of expertise or responsibility, but if there are not the unifying policies and procedures to wrap around or guide the actions of the folks, you can face some challenges. So I think what you have listed here is some of the initial questions you can start asking yourselves and people in your organization as you seek to identify what policies need to be included as you address this. I always find it interesting from a workshop perspective as we start working with clients in this, that asking these simple questions, it's pretty interesting to see what's actually revealed about what's happening in the organization, who's doing what, who knows what about this part as opposed to the other, and what have you. It's a great way to uncover policy gaps and ensure some establish the base for bringing some clarity for the future.
Great. Yeah, I've experienced the same, asking those similar questions. So we have here, Jeff, I'll stay with you. We have here a couple of slides of policies to consider. Just to keep an eye on time, if we can move through these two fairly quickly. We're getting to a point where I want to be able to stop and ask questions, but I don't want to skip over these entirely. So if you can just talk us through some policies to consider, things that, when they go back to their office or turn this webinar off and start thinking about this internally in their organizations, there's some things that they should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you have some of those answers from the previous questions digested, you can start to focus in the areas of policy where you might have the greatest exposure. Some of those might be from an eDiscovery perspective. Having policies in place that can guide the tactical execution of the work steps is good. Even better to have the codified procedures or playbooks defined. This can help with consistency in the interpretation of policy, consistent training across the resources, and consistent execution of the services. The first four that we have here underneath eDiscovery are kind of fall squarely in that area, pretty familiar with most. I think what's interesting regarding the legal hold lifts and remediation is that it starts to turn that conversation back to this more information governance model, right? The global, more holistic area where we started the conversation today. Likewise, data retention and disposition policies are, again, framing this work with the more holistic view in mind for the enterprise. If you want to move on to the next slide where I think we talk about privacy and some other.
Yep. There you go.
Sure. Specifically as it relates to data privacy and data security, there are several common challenges, especially for global enterprises. Creating a privacy strategy that accounts for complex, multi-regulatory, and changing environments that they may be in can be quite vexing at times. For diversified multinational firms, managing customer and employee concerns and perceptions across these different cultures and industries is one of the challenges that falls underneath privacy. Knowing how the PII is acquired in the organization, what they do with it, where it is, who it's shared with, and how it's disposed of. Again, another challenge. And reconciling those inconsistent practices among the affiliates, the different regions, the different countries. This even extends to what maybe your service providers and vendors might be doing with that information as well that have access to it. A quick, interesting story I'm working through right now, from a discovery perspective, these issues can influence what data you process, where you can process it, where you can host the data, where the reviewers who need to review it need to sit, how the reviewers can access the data, and what data is reviewed. The example I was going to share, I'm helping a firm through a divestiture of some certain products right now, EU-based company. We had to set up 4 different data transfer agreements, even though it's the same organization, to get all the information that needed to be reviewed into some place where it could be hosted. The subject matter expertise are in another part of the EU, the scientists and what have you doing the review, and there was a specific area within the EU, Switzerland, that had to be ring-fenced entirely into itself because of the differences as it relates to privacy and PII and what have you. So just an example to demonstrate how complex it can be and all the steps you got to get through to get it right.
Absolutely. All right, Michael, help us down the technology side. So, I think we've heard that people are, I think, the weakest link in the chain at the moment, and that policy is going to back up all those things you train them to do and give a mechanism for measurement, enforcement, and improvement. But how should we be thinking about and using technology in this context? Is it replacing the people, or is it supplementing what you're trying to do?
Well, I think there should be this holistic approach where it's a combination of technical and non-technical. And on the technical side, we have here, know your ESI, electronically stored information. Know what kind of information your company has. What type of data is it? What format is it in? How large is it? How is it used? Who needs access to it? And also is mapping your environment. So where is the information? Where does this data reside? Where is it and how is it stored? Is it in a database? Is it on a SharePoint? Is it on a server? And then there's different technical controls depending on where and how this information is. And also classifying your data. You can't boil the ocean, so you need to really figure out all of the information on your network. What is your critical value data? And then that's the information that you really need to safeguard. And in securing the data collections, you really need to limit and monitor who accesses that information. And again, we could do this by implementing access controls. Not everybody needs access to this data. So an admin doesn't need access to client lists, and salesmen don't need access to formulas or intellectual property. So you really need to figure out who needs access to what and then implement access controls accordingly. And then also when it comes to limiting exposure, especially in eDiscovery, you have these beautiful subsets of data where the information may be secure on the network, but once you collect it and you have these eDiscovery collections, you have this one place with all this relevant information that might not be secure. And then to take that even further, there's copies and working copies that are sitting out there. Analysts are working on them, or perhaps they're being delivered to third party or outside counsel. You really need to limit the exposure of your data. And again, monitoring activity is really important. Who's accessing what, and why are they accessing it? How are they accessing it as well?
Excellent. Very good. So we're at the end of the slides, but I did want to give you guys an opportunity to give some closing thoughts. So anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to be sure is said, or if you don't have any of those, I'd love maybe a little prognostication. What do you see changing or on the horizon that we need to be thinking about in the next 12 months or even a longer term, 5 years? James, do you want to start there?
Sure. I'll go back to some of the discussions we had in this presentation and give you a quick prognostication. As far as policies and building up internal policies within organizations to help with this issue, not solve it necessarily, but to help with both information governance generally and then information governance specific to the environment that's created through the eDiscovery or litigation hold process. Having a policy, I'm a firm believer in this, having a policy is better than nothing. I've had clients and other practitioners push back on that, saying, well, if I've got a policy, then I'm out of compliance, and that's not good, thinking about like representations in front of the FTC or something. And this isn't a public representation. It's internal guidance that may become public. And I've been part of a number of regulatory investigations where if there is something that happens, if there's some kind of breach or an incident, one of the very first things that regulators ask for is, what are your policies? Give us your policies. And then when you're dealing with a deponent on something that may have gone wrong, being able to point to a policy and saying, this individual was off the reservation. They did not act as we believe a reasonable employee would act, and the reason why we have an idea or can demonstrate what a reasonable employee is because we can point to a policy. We can point to a schedule. We can point to something that would define that reasonable employee. Without that opportunity to define, we're left with everybody is a vigilante. Everybody's a cowboy, and they're just doing their own thing. And while that may be true at some organizations, the hope is that getting policies, having a place or a repository of information where employees can go to find answers is a good thing. Prospectively, I think with eDiscovery, the ways in which we deal with all this are going to change even further. We're getting more and more sophisticated discovery requests that are less about necessarily volumes of information, especially with changes to the federal rules, and more, in my experience, of database reporting, getting ERP reports, or getting to the heart of information that the opposing party is looking to for proving their case. And for us to adequately deal with eDiscovery, we have to become more expert in those systems and know what the right questions are to ask of internal people.
Thank you. Jeff, any closing thoughts?
Yep, sorry, just getting off of mute. If you wanted to ask me to look about where I think some of the challenges and the focus will be in 5 years, we alluded to a little bit in the conversation, but I think cloud services are going to start bundling a lot of these eDiscovery services right into their solutions. I think right now organizations really aren't sure, have a good handle on what the right balance of governance versus use or access is of cloud services, but I think that's going to change. And so I think it will be incumbent upon us all when we start working more in the cloud to do our due diligence and make sure we're getting the levels of security and services that are needed. I was reading a summary report the other day, and in fact, that the top inhibitors by enterprise organizations for the adoption of cloud are security, regulatory compliance, privacy, lock-in, and complexity. And I think those will be some of the challenges we'll be helping folks unwind in the next few years.
Excellent. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer in the holistic approach, having technical and non-technical. As James had said, you got to have a policy. You have to enforce it. If something happens, you could always, somebody says, why did you do that? You can say, oh, because we have a policy and I followed it. And then generally there's no more questions after that. But without a policy, you really have nothing to back it up. So, and I also believe, as far as moving into the future, something Jeff said, I see eDiscovery being treated more as a business process.
Excellent. All right, thank you guys. We do have some questions, and we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to try and get through a couple of them. So I'm going to let Jeff and James fight out who goes for this one. So here's the question. What steps, legal, technology, or otherwise, should we take to ensure that our produced ESI is adequately protected by our adversary or the requesting party? Anybody want to take that one?
I mean, there's no one-size-fits-all solution to this either, and that is the first step is acknowledging that there's a problem or a potential issue, and recognizing that there are different ways in which you can deal with confidentiality, filing things under seal, so at least keeping it off of the public record, and making sure that the opposing party is well aware of those restrictions as well. You don't want there to be confusion. You don't want that cat let out of the bag. But it's tough. We've had discussions, and the Sedona Conference has been active in this space too, in trying to determine, can you force the opposing party to sign essentially statements and agreements that they're going to abide by certain security practices, even if it's asymmetric litigation with asymmetric discovery burdens, and you've got what we might call a smaller shop on the other side, where they're asking for information on personal health information, person identifiable information, financial information that may come up in the context of labor and employment suits or sexual discrimination or whatever it might be. I think some of those have gotten traction, but again, it's more look at the case, look at how important the data is, and if that is a true concern, maybe you can severely narrow the scope of what's produced, and or you can create ways in which you can tokenize or anonymize that data. We've done some work on data privacy and data kind of this differential approach to that, but that's taken to extreme. The first issue is recognizing it and then trying to find the really solid beginning steps on addressing it.
Wonderful. Thank you. This is a great question. It goes right to the heart of why we're here today. So I want to make sure we ask it in our last couple of minutes here. So the question is, what security threats do you see from hired document reviewers, and how would you minimize them? And that's open to whoever wants to jump in first. And if nobody jumps in, I'll pick on you. All right, Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, maybe you
Hired
can help me
document reviewers.
Hire document reviews. You mean hired, like subcontract document reviewers?
Yeah, I think that's what the point is.
Okay, I thought it meant like higher in the hierarchy, more senior document reviewers. But from managing contract document reviewers, I think is the heart of the contract, the heart of the question. Absolutely, the service providers that you're using to provide those services should have pretty well-established policies and procedures, vetting processes, security, background checks, and what have you in place, which they should be willing to review with you both what it is from a policy perspective and what the results are for individuals. And I would say, having that type of discussion before getting into the contract with the document reviewer would be one of the first places to start.
Excellent. Well, that was perfect timing. We're right at the top of the hour, so I apologize if we didn't get to your question. We will take a look, and if there's something that, or feel free to contact any of us. We're happy to answer questions offline. So a quick thank you to all of our attendees, and of course, thank you to our panel here. I think it was a great discussion. I appreciate your time and sharing your insights and expertise. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.